Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Power BI Reports for Workspace Insights. I'm your account manager, Natalie Hawkins, and I'm joined today by our Customer Success Manager, Jenny Pitts. In this webinar, Jenny will speak to you about the range of reporting options and different deployment options, as well as the customizations available within these Power BI reports. We will be holding a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go along and we will answer those during that session. Over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Natalie, and welcome to everyone that has joined us today. Our hope and aim of today's webinar is to show you a little bit about Power BI if you haven't seen it before, and how you can link that to data from ProvisionPoint workspaces. So hopefully by the time we finish, you'll know a little bit more about Power BI and ProvisionPoint workspaces. So I'm going to start today by explaining what is Power BI. As you can see, it is a collection of software services, apps, connections that work together to turn your unrelated sources of data into coherent, visually immersive, and interactive insights. Now, for us, what that really means is you can have a variety of data sources. That could be the Dataverse, SQL databases, SharePoint lists, Excel, that you want to make into a more interactive and visually pleasing report or dashboard. And Power BI is a tool that Microsoft provide that allow us to do that. Now, there's lots of reporting options available around, but why do we choose to use Power BI? There's many reasons, and we've highlighted some of the most common ones here. So it's widely available, and many people already use it day to day. So it could be a case of you're doing some reporting internally for management for other things, and now you can then move Power BI to also report on what workspaces have I created. It's a fully customizable option. You pull in the data and you choose what you're going to show and what you're going to do. Obviously, there are some standard reporting that everyone will probably like to look at. So how many workspaces have I got? Is guest access enabled? And things like that. But you might also have some very unique reporting that you want to do. And Power BI lets you look at both those scenarios. We're keeping your workspace information secure. We're not taking it and putting it anywhere else other than the areas that you've already agreed and consented to. So you have it within ProvisionPoint workspaces, and then you're accessing it through your Microsoft identity. So you're using your single sign-on, which gives you a peace of mind that your information is secure. With Power BI, you can also easily share reports with people via email. You can download it to store it offline for yourself. You could even share it with or into Teams or SharePoint sites. So you're in control of who can see this report and who can interact with it. So that's a little bit about Power BI. So now I'm going to take you through a demo. We're going to have a look at ProvisionPoint workspaces. So I'm just going to open my screen. This is my environment. I've got a multitude of workspaces created in various forms and guises, and I can click around and have a look at all the different bits of information that I have through the application. Now, we're going to link to a site directory list that is created from ProvisionPoint workspaces. Now, it may be something that some of you haven't already configured or haven't seen before, so I'm going to show you where we configure that. So I've come into the admin side, so I'm an app manager, I get to see all of the tabs. And within my service definitions, I've got an integration tab. And more specifically in here, a site directory list. Now, this is a SharePoint list that we export all of the request information that you fill in on your request form That could be owners, it could be a department, it could be whether or not you want it to be a private or a public team. It could be any of that configuration. And we pass that out to an existing SharePoint site. And the first time we do this, we create the list that is named here. And then anytime we update this team or via our actions, or anytime we create anything new in ProvisionPoint or import into ProvisionPoint, it will then go and update this list. Now, for all of my service definitions, I've pointed them to the same list for our demonstration today. And as part of what we offer now, there is a free Power BI template and transform data steps that we can send you so that you can actually create the report that you're about to see. Now, initially, this is going to take us into our site directory list. So this is the one that is linked to my service definition. So this is the list of information that we are using as our data source. The first thing I do is open Power BI Desktop, and I open my PBIT file that we provide you on our knowledge base article. You'll see a link to that a little bit later. Obviously, you can start from scratch, but it is always nice to come in with something that's partially created for you. Now, when in Power BI Desktop, this is where you come initially to build out the visualization of what you want to see. And in our case, we've got a summary page with a few other tabs that I'll take you through in a moment. And we can also have a look at transforming the data. Oh, pardon me. So what we need to do is point it to a SharePoint list, which is a site directory list, because by default, all of the columns will be named accordingly, and we can then manipulate that data using this template. So under Get Data, you have some options in here, and if you're ever looking to do this, if you go into More and type SharePoint, you will find a SharePoint online list as an option. And in true form, it's not going to open for me in this occasion. There it is. So if I type in SharePoint, I can see there's a SharePoint online list, and I can go and connect to that. Now, because I can see figures in mine, I know I don't need to do that. It's already been completed. The second stage is you want to look at transforming that data. So all transform data really is looking at all of the columns of information you've got, making sure it's the right thing. If it's a date field, it needs to be a date field. If it's a text field, it needs to be a text field. And one thing I always recommend with Power BI is remove any columns that you don't need, because it's just taking up space. Now, we can provide you a list of steps that we do. We do a variety of renaming columns, making sure we're pulling through the owners from your site directory list, because as you may know with ProvisionPoint Workspaces, there are a number of ways of defining who the owner of your teams and sites should be. Within our steps, we've accounted to allow you to merge those together to complete a count of those owners as well. Now, once you've come in and you've transformed the data and you've connected to the right SharePoint list, you should then see a population of this report. Now, in this report, we're doing a number of things. So we're counting how many requests there have been. We're looking at the life cycle or the lease that's been applied. So if there is a lease assigned, how many are due to expire in the next few months? And how many have recently been archived? And I can see that these figures are listed here. But we're also looking at things like the privacy. How many are private? How many have guest access enabled? How many are teams and how many are sites? As well as which service definition are they linked to? We can also take it one stage further by looking at a custom column that you've added to your request form. So for example, here we have departments, because I have a number of departmental teams that can be created. And the joy of Power BI is I can go and have a filter and look at each individual department and say for operations, I can see that guest access is disabled, it's definitely private. So I can start looking at relevant information. What I can also do is have a look through some of the other tabs that we have created as well. So it may be a case of I want to have a deeper dive into the requests and see when the requests are made. So here we have a timeline that will populate as you start creating your teams and your sites, when they were created and how many there were. If we look at lifecycle, we can see again a graph building up a timeline of when things were done. And again, from these, there are options. So we can right click and we can drill through to the details tab. And then we're only going to drill through to look at that specific detail. And again, we can do that from the summary page as well. And this one is quite nice. If I want to look at only any sites or teams that have guest access enabled, I can drill through and just see those four within here, and I can see a bit of extra information. As well as that, I can then link back into the info screen in ProvisionPoint Workspaces. Now, the categories area is really looking at if we've set anything up around the department field. So I can just see a little bit more information at percentage-wise, how many are in each service definition. So I can see if there's any service definitions that we maybe don't need anymore. So there's lots of information here. Once we've made sure all of our visualizations are correct and are how we need them, and everything is where we need them by using all of our visualizations and the fields that we have pulled in from our data source, we need to publish this. And once we publish, this will then take us into Power BI Online. And you have an area called My Workspaces, but you can create multiple workspaces to store your reporting on. Now, I've already done this, so I have my Power Env site directory report dataset and the report. I've got a couple of others that I'll be showing you later. Within these, I can then set how often I want this data to refresh. So obviously, if I make a change and I add a new workspace, I want to know that I can schedule this to refresh once a day, once a week, twice a day, as often as I need to make sure that the data is up to date and I don't have to do anything. It's automated behind the scenes. I can come in and then have a look at the report here, and I get to see very similar to what I saw down below. Obviously, this one is active, whereas my Power BI desktop was looking at data from 2 days ago. So it didn't have my new requests in here and my recently archived one. So I know this is working. Now, here is where I then get to say, who and where do I want to share this? Obviously, you've got sharing options, but under File, you've got a lot of other options as well. If you want to embed it into SharePoint Online, for example, you can do all of that, and you can embed it into a team. So if I come into my home of my SharePoint page, I've already done this publish it to a SharePoint page, and I can see here is my report, and I can make sure this is then shared with anyone that needs to see it, and they can come in and they can start having a nose around and look at, right, for my external projects, I can see 4 have guest access enabled and 1 is disabled. Now, what about my internal ones? Because obviously they should all be guest access disabled, and they are. So that's really quick insights that I can get. So we've covered a little bit about what reports can we run. So we've seen there was a total count of workspaces, expiry information, guest access information, but we can also track sensitivity labels. Now, I didn't have sensitivity labels configured in my environment because I'm actually using my service definitions to manage those same container options that you can manage with sensitivity labels. But if you have them enabled, this report can support that and show you which labels have also been applied. I mentioned that we've linked to a custom department, which is a custom column set up on my request form. Obviously, not all of them have a department, so there are some with blanks. The data that we looked at for this instance was a site directory list, which is configurable within ProvisionPoint Workspace service definitions. Now, if you are sending this out currently to different site directory lists, then we need that transform data within Power BI to also point to those different ones and combine that information. But what if we're not getting enough information? What if you have an approval process in place? It's not picking up any pre-approvals because they're not currently added to the site directory list. The site directory list is only updated at the end of your provisioning, not at the start when we're doing the approval. We've also got jobs that maybe need some investigation because they're in our job queue. And we might want to look at that as an app manager in a report, but not everyone needs to see it. We might have even enabled compliance policies within ProvisionPoint to report on external sharing, disabled owners, or check that it's meeting my naming convention standards. None of that data is available in that site directory list, so I might need to expand my data sources. One option for doing this is using our vast API. So we have a variety of API calls that you can link out to, from getting all of the workspaces to populate the information about everything, which is very similar to the site directory list. But it does contain a few extra fields. It contains things like who the requester was. You can call the job queue and pull out anything that is pending approval, anything that has failed, and store them somewhere. And the same with the compliance data. You can collect data from your compliance report rules. Now, once you get that data, you need to store it somewhere. That could be a SQL database, that could be another SharePoint list, or it could be the Dataverse. We have another example and another solution within a Dataverse that can be used to configure tables for your compliance, your job queue, and your workspaces, all using our API to go and collect the information. Now, in that case, we get a slightly different report. We have to go through the same process as before. We have to start in Power BI with a PBIT file, and we have to build out the Dataverse to make sure everything is there and connect to the data and transform it where we need to get the information we need. But that transformed data is completely customizable and you can change it all. This is one that I've created and published already, again, to my SharePoint site. And in here, I can see very similar information to what I did before, but now I've got how many pending approvals there are, as well as a little area about compliance. And I can see in this one, I do have my sensitivity labels being flagged, but again, they're all blank, so that's fine. But I can then start drilling through and looking at all of this extra information that I didn't have before. So I can drill through to look at anything that is non-compliant. And in here, they're highlighted in red. So if I do go to the full list, I can still see non-compliance. And there's an extra link. So instead of taking me to the ProvisionPoint info screen, which I can do very happily, and it will open ProvisionPoint and tell me lots of information. But the policy check will also allow me to see what compliance check was run, what non-compliance is found with quick ease. And in this case, there was a disabled owner. So I can see exactly what's going on. And I can easily jump around my report and look for things that are relevant for me. Now you can also go a stage further and link into other bits of data that maybe aren't related to ProvisionPoint. You might want to link it into CRM data or even into some calls that you're making directly to Microsoft via the graph yourself. This is customizable. From within Power BI Desktop, you can also look at changing the theme. Obviously, we have a lovely orange and blue theme potentially assigned, but you can make changes and change the theme up. Make sure it's coloured and displayed in a way that you like. Obviously, once you've got these in place, it's yours to customize how you want it to be customized. Now we have some useful resources. We have the ProvisionPoint knowledge base. So all of our partners and all of our customers have access to this knowledge base where they can come in and have a look at how to configure a site directory list and how to create a Power BI report using that list. And all of the instructions are there ready for you. I hope you've learned a little bit about Power BI and how that works and ties into ProvisionPoint and the data that we have. Obviously, we've leveraged the API and we've leveraged the site directory list. So I'd like to open out now and see, are there any questions from any of our attendees?
We've had a couple of questions in, Jenny. The
Awesome.
first one is, do we need a license to use Power BI?
Okay, you don't need a license to use Power BI, but if you are sharing the report, you will need a license. I believe it's included if you've got an E5 license, so you don't have to pay anything extra. But if you don't, you can pay for the Power BI license to allow you to share it.
Perfect. And we've had a question of, what if I don't have the department field? Can I use a different metadata field from my request form in my report?
You can. Obviously, when we send this out, we give an example of department because it's quite a common one. But that can be tweaked and pointed to any other metadata field that you have. So things like business unit or anything like that, or customer maybe. Yes, you can just easily replace those values and point it to the different field that you have within your site directory list, or if you are going down the route of the API, whichever table has the relevant fields in.
Okay, and the last question that I have here is there any support offered to set this up for existing customers? I can answer that one if that's okay.
Please
Um,
do.
for all of the existing customers, I'd suggest just to contact your account manager, so that would be myself, um, to discuss going through that and setting it up. But we do offer support around the Power BI reporting. We've also got some articles on the knowledge base that will tell you a little bit about what you'd need to do to set that up as well.
Thank you, Natalie.
We'll just wait a couple of minutes to see if any other questions come in.
Okay. Well, whilst we're waiting, I would just like to take this opportunity to say thank you for attending. I hope it's been educational, and obviously if you do have any questions, Natalie's your account manager. You can reach out to her, and obviously I think most of you probably know me from the support and delivery side of things, so you know how to get hold of us. Go into the knowledge base, you can raise a ticket or email us at help@provisionpoint.com. don't think we're getting any more questions. So with that in mind, Natalie, shall we wrap things up?
Yeah, I think we'll wrap things up. Like Jenny said, if you have any questions, just give us a shout.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.